I think the Brazilians are just mad at the fact that, they're getting a bad rap on this. But it's unfortunate for Ryan Lochte because, he's a 4-time Olympian. He's most likely going to retire after this Olympic. This is going to be, kind of the lasting impression that fans, swimming fans and, fans worldwide remember him as. And, I kind of go back to Michael Phelps after the 2012 Olympics. He had, the whole marijuana controversy, and, he's actually had 2 DUIs, but, he comes in the 2016 Olympics with a big performance, and you just kind of forget about all that. So it's just kind of a lasting impression. And with great athletes like Michael Phelps, I think American sports fans are pretty reluctant to give him a free pass. So it's very unfortunate because I think that is going to be the lasting impression of Ryan Lochte.
Zach, any thoughts on this?
I'm not quite even sure where to start with this guy. I mean, gets down to Brazil. I mean, he doesn't really swim as well as he wants to, and then he finishes off by lying to the media saying that he was jumped. I mean, I don't know if he's trying to make Rio look bad as a host. Like, it seemed like a lot of athletes didn't have the best experience down there, but it almost seemed like he was gunning for Rio when he did all that, and then fleeing the country after doing that, with leaving some of those other swimmers there to try and face all the music for him. I don't know. 2 of those guys, I can't remember which 2, but they were pulled off their plane. They were minutes away from getting out of Brazil.
In the airport, like they were just yanked.
Yeah, they were minutes away from getting out of Brazil and didn't get out. So Lochte was already back in the U.S. when that happened, though. So not a good way to end the Olympics for the American swim team at all.
I guess the one beef I have with this is that Brazil thinks it gives them a bad rep. But, I mean, these guys weren't the only ones that had problems with the law. I mean, you had guys that, got kidnapped and had traffic incidents and that were, I guess, harassed in public. I mean, it's no secret that security in Rio was a huge problem this year.
There was some of the Australian Olympic team right when they got to Rio, they moved into their hotel and then had a bunch of complaints because there were loose wires sitting in water and stuff.
Plumbing issues.
Right, and so they moved them out of the hotel. And then they fixed all the problems, and they were happy with it, put them back into that hotel. And then in the middle of their first night there, the fire alarm went off in the middle of the night, so they had to completely evacuate the hotel. And then when they all went back in, about an hour later when they got the all clear, they were all robbed. So that's just like an example of some of the bad things that happened to some of these teams when they were in Rio. Just not a great host at all this Olympics.
And I mean, you also heard about that controversy in 2012 at the Sochi Olympics as well, so...
Yeah, absolutely. So
it's always just kind of a trend, with, Brazil, I think, is a great country, but, there's obviously some glaring problems in that country with the poverty level and, the crime.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was, even before the Olympics started, you heard about Zika virus, the big risk with that, the swimming water being unsafe for a certain point. I mean, just all odds and ends of things. I mean, there was like threat against the law and all these things. Like there was a sign I said that said like something like, "You will be attacked because police aren't paid here," or something like that. So yeah, it was just a very, I mean, it was
the police force protested,
right,
because they weren't getting paid. So they said, "Why are we even doing our job if we aren't going to get paid?"
Right. Yeah, and I saw like signs that were talking about that on Twitter. So yeah, it was, despite like it being a great Olympics with Simone Biles, Michael Phelps, and Usain Bolt and all of those highlight moments. Yeah, it was still a very odd Olympics, and it's still carrying over thanks to Ryan Lochte. I think Gunnar Bentz issued official apology this week. So we'll see. Brazil police have recommended charges. I kind of doubt, like Reid kind of said, I doubt that anything comes of this, but Brazil is still pretty unhappy with Ryan Lochte. I understand why, but it's like, you know what, just let it go. The Olympics are over. Close the yearbook, and
I think it's just going to
move on.
I think it's just going to be a joke, kind of like the whole Brian Williams deal with NBC,
or like a Johnny Manziel type thing.
Yeah, you Ryan Lochte that story or something. It's just going to be like a funny term, basically. I don't see him pressing charges at all.
Number 2.
All right, moving on. Despite only playing 3 snaps against Seattle last night, those Seahawks beat the Cowboys in preseason action 27-17. Dallas Cowboys quarterback Tony Romo jammed his back after being sacked by defensive end Cliff Averill. We'll learn later today whether or not Romo needs an MRI. Everyone says Dallas will be a playoff contender if Romo can stay healthy. But Zach, the question is, can he?
Everything that I've read says Romo's fine, that he was pulled out of the game for precaution, that if that game really mattered, he's in there, despite his back being injured. But the thing that isn't even mentioned by a lot of people is their backup, Dak Prescott, is tearing it up
in the
preseason. He has 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, like 600 yards passing.
What did he go, like 12 for 15 the other night?
And 2 rushing touchdowns. He's the guy at Mississippi State that we've been watching for years. He's just kind of like an average college quarterback, and then he gets drafted. He's supposed to be this backup for Romo, and he is just lining it up in the preseason. So if Romo really can't go at any point this season, Dak Prescott has no real NFL game experience, but he's about as good as it gets, it looks like, in the NFL when it comes to a backup quarterback.
Reid, any thoughts on the Cowboys situation?
Well, I think it's a little bit too early. Preseason is a little bit different story, obviously. Yeah. But, for what was he, 4th or 5th round pick?
Yeah, so he was later. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that's a hell of a pickup there in the later rounds, especially with quarterbacks. It's very hard to, draft a kid first in the first year and have that much success coming into the NFL. So, the thing about Tony Romo is he has a great offensive line, one of the best in the league, but he just doesn't know how to move around the pocket very well. He takes so many hits every single year, and he just holds onto the ball way too long. I don't see him getting past, the December month into the January. I think Dallas is going to have kind of a flashback of last year. I don't really see him getting back to the playoffs. Tony Romo, a back injury is very hard to get out of, and, I think Tony Romo, I think he's 35 right now. And
yeah,
so,
that sounds right. Yep.
It's probable, yes, but coming off back surgery and already having problems this early in the preseason, it raises some red flags for sure.
Yeah, so we'll see where this goes. And Ezekiel Elliott's another young Cowboy, another young draft pick, though he was 4th overall, so we kind of expected it. He's kind of been bursting on the scene after that whole alleged violence charge that was going on and everything. That's kind of been silenced for now. I don't think we're completely done hearing about that. It sounds like Ezekiel is not guilty. It sounds like at this point in time, but we'll see. So that's kind of all said and done right now. But yeah, Dak Prescott certainly one to watch last night. 17 for 23, 116 yards and a touchdown. So yeah, he's been impressive so far. He's a mobile quarterback. We knew that when he was at Mississippi State. So maybe it could be a little quarterback competition. If Romo goes down again like he did last year, maybe the Cowboys won't be in as bad a shape without Matt Castle under center. So yeah, it'll be worth watching. All right, finally today, ESPN, in opening headlines, ESPN came out with a list of the most important programs in the history of college football. There was a 5-way tie for first between Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and USC. Nebraska came in at number 8. Texas is right above at number 7. So, Reid, my question to you is, should Nebraska be higher, and should there be a 5-way tie for first?
I think Texas should be behind Nebraska. I mean, Texas, they've been very good in flashes. I'll give you that, but I'm going to give you their record throughout the 90s. They got 8-0 in 1990, 4-4 in 1991, 4-3 in 1992, 5-2 in 1993, 7-3 in 1994. They had a good year in 1995. They went 10-2-1 overall. But, there's a lot of losing seasons in that schedule. And, you talk about Nebraska. I think Bo Pelini had, one of the most consecutive 9-win seasons in college football. And, we've, outside of 2007 and, of course, last year, we've really been a consistent upper tier echelon, college football program. And I think Texas has kind of been all over the board. And currently, they're trending down with Charlie Strong.
Yeah, it's a make or break year for Charlie Strong, if you ask me. And I don't think Ohio State should be tied for first. I mean, they have 7 Heisman trophies, including Archie Griffin, the 2-timer. And they do have 6 national titles, 35 conference titles. That's less than Nebraska has. So I get Notre Dame being tied for first. They have like the best all-time winning percentage. I don't think Oklahoma should be tied for first. I mean, they were really, 75% of their conference games since 1895, 14 undefeated seasons, but they haven't won a title since 2000, so I think that's a little high. USC,
hard to argue with USC.
Yeah, USC is a good one. I think Michigan maybe should be higher than 6. I think maybe Michigan should be tied for first. I would maybe swap the Wolverines for maybe Ohio State. I'm sure people in Columbus would hate me for saying that. But, Zach, did you have thoughts on this?
Just looking at this list, down at number 14, biggest snub on the entire list,
Ooh,
Miami.
Wow.
That is, I think that Miami arguably has the greatest college football team of all time in 2001.
Right.
And they're down at 14. Like you said, this is about programs. This isn't about 1 year.
Right.
But still, that team, what they did to that 0-1 Nebraska team in the national title game, is just ridiculous, and the fact that they're at 14 is just a huge snub in my opinion.
Yep, Wisconsin comes in at number 24. Oregon is tied for 21st. Michigan State tied for 18th. Looking up the list here, Florida State 13th. Florida tied for 11th. I think they should maybe be a little bit higher. They've been pretty good in the 20th century in the Tim Tebow days. They're they have trended downward, but I think Jim McElwain has them on the right track. Penn State at 10, I'll agree with that. Say what you want about Joe Pa, but and if you're talking just purely football, pre-Sandusky era, yeah, I'd say that's fair. LSU number 9, I'd say that's pretty fair. I like the fact that Nebraska's ahead of a SEC school right there. That's going to do it for opening headlines today. That was just the 3 right there. We're going to get into more NFL headlines. Got some Major League Baseball things to talk. That'll be on in the second hour. But coming up after the break, we'll have Chris Heady, former Daily Nebraskan editor-in-chief, and he's now the Nebraska football beat writer for landof10.com. It's a website that covers basically all Big Ten football, and Chris is the main guy for the Huskers. He's been at every practice, every press conference this fall. So we'll get Chris's thoughts on all of the latest. Nate Gary, Brandon Riley will be suspended for the first game, in case you haven't heard. So that was the big news out of yesterday's practice. And Darion Grimm left the program just a couple of days ago. So we'll break all of that down and more with Chris Heady from landof10.com when we return. Beyond the Arc, KRNU2.
This is your home for sports. You're listening to Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming worldwide at krnu.unl.edu.
Welcome back in. This is Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming live at krnu.unl.edu on the TuneIn Radio app and on iTunes Radio. And you can find this show on the podcast when we're done at youtube.com and search Beyond the Arc. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the program, a lot of buzz around Lincoln right now. It's about time for Husker football. Fall camp is over. They're now into just their routine weekly workouts as they get now ready for Fresno State. That's kind of been the focus, more schemes towards Fresno State as they will be here in 8 days. And the Huskers had practice yesterday in media availability, and obviously the big bombshell was the 2 suspensions announced of Brandon Riley and safety Nate Gary. And here to break that down and several other football-related topics is he is a beat writer for Nebraska football for the Big Ten website called landof10.com, a alum of the KRNU airwaves and of the Daily Nebraskan. Chris Heady joins us on the Beyond the Arc Nothing But Net hotline. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tommy, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's nice to finally get on your show. I've been waiting for the call for a year now. So
come on, Tom.
Yeah, I know you used to be on Swanigan's show all the time. So yeah, I felt a little bit behind.
He used to call me and we used to fight about random stuff.
that sounds like Ryan, but I guess maybe I was waiting for your full-time job. No, I'm kidding. But either way, great to have you on the show. So let's dive right in. As I said, the big news out of yesterday was the announced suspension of Brandon Riley and Nate Gary for. It's just one game, the Fresno State game. So I guess overall, I mean, people always have hot takes when it comes to little things like this. I guess overall to you, what does this mean for Nebraska as they go forward with preparing for Fresno State?
Right. So the Brandon Riley suspension wasn't a huge shock. If you guys remember, a couple months ago, he was arrested on suspicion of a DUI.
Right.
So you kind of knew that suspension was going to come. We didn't know what it was going to be or how significant, especially when you add in the Keith Williams DUI. You kind of depends on the way you wanted to handle that. So the one game, that's not insanely shocking. The big thing though that I took away from it was Nate Gary. That was kind of something we didn't expect. Not really sure why he was suspended. Riley just said violation of team rules, which you kind of have to take with a grain of salt, because sometimes that could mean something extremely serious, or it could mean like missing a practice, or being late to practice, or late to a film session, or something small like that. So I guess the main thing that I kind of started thinking about was if you're Nate Gary, you're basically the quarterback of the defense, right? I mean, he's probably going to be a captain. He's been around long enough. He kind of should know better, and so. I wouldn't put too much stock in it, but it is something where it kind of makes you wonder, what's going on with Nate Gary, kind of, because he seems like a guy that's been on top of things and is a leader, that kind of does it the right way. And so the suspension, I don't know what it is. I'm not sure what his infraction was or anything. So it could have been something as small as missing a meeting or missing practice or something like that, or being late. But even so, you don't really expect those kinds of things from someone that's presumably going to be a captain.
Right. And, Mark Banker, I remember him singing Nate Gary's praises, I think, week 1 of fall camp. He said, I love coaching the guy. He's progressed nicely. I look forward to what he's going to be doing. So, yeah, it always seems like that he and Banker, Coach Stu, had a good relationship. So, yeah, it is a surprise. So, I guess piggybacking off that question, Mark Banker mentioned after yesterday's practice, some of the guys that might see time at safety in that first game. We saw Antonio Reid do some good things in the Foster Farms Bowl. Kyron Williams has had a good fall camp. Another name that I think of is Aaron Williams. He saw some time off the bench last year. So I guess in your eyes, who might be the lead candidate to play that safety spot against Fresno now?
Yeah, so I've been kind of trying to follow that the whole fall camp because Aaron Williams, started quite a few games last year because that safety position was just wide open, and he kind of showed that he can hold it down. And then Aaron Williams ended up getting hurt in the spring, and that's when Kerryon Williams kind of came in and showed what he can do. And so now it was kind of it was a battle between Aaron Williams and Kerryon Williams, I think, of who was going to take that opposite safety spot. And now that Nate Gary is not going to be playing against Fresno State, it's kind of an audition, I think, for both of them. I assume both of them are probably going to start both at safety. So I think it's kind of, almost in a way a benefit because then you get to see full time for both of those players, and then you can take that actual game tape and look at it and say, okay, I liked what he did here more than the other person, so he's going to get the starting role. So in a way, the Fresno State game is just going to be one big audition for, I think, the Williams. For who wants that other, or who's going to end up getting that other safety spot. They're both pretty different, I think, in the way that they play safety. Aaron Williams is really good in the run. He's not really a guy that's going to get you a couple picks. I think he's more so he just closes in on receivers really well. Kerryon Williams on the other side, I think he is more athletic. He's more able to go get those deep balls and kind of get those jump balls. So I think it's kind of come down to it depends on what they want, or it depends on kind of what they think they need. And at the same time, we've always put a whole lot of stock in who's going to start and who is going to get some more playing time. But I think in the grand scheme of things, they'll both probably get pretty significant playing time this year. I think we'll see both of them, and it'll kind of depend on I think eventually it'll kind of depend on who Nebraska's playing, what the schemes are, and kind of a game-by-game basis.
Yeah, and we saw Nate Gary kind of struggle with the scheme adjustment last year, playing more man-to-man defense, and that could be one he just didn't have as many interceptions. He just wasn't as solid on coverage. So, yeah, we've seen Nate Gary struggle schematically at times, and for that first game, yeah, it could be, I've heard from a couple of guys, it could be more than one guy just coming off the bench in between series, so it'll be fun to watch. Wanted to ask you about the other big news, obviously, on Wednesday night about Darion Grimm, and then I'll turn it over to Reid and Zach for a question or two. So, Wednesday night, three-star receiver and true freshman Darion Grimm announced over Twitter that he's leaving the Nebraska football program. He told Brian Christopherson of the Lincoln Journal-Star that Darion felt uncomfortable in Lincoln. Darion's father told that to Christopherson, that he overall felt uncomfortable in Lincoln, and he was considering leaving all the way back in spring, even though he had a pretty solid spring game and a solid spring camp. So given Nebraska's current depth at receiver and with the rise of fellow true freshman J.D. Spielman, how significant is this loss, and how surprising is it really?
Right. So actually about 30 minutes before you called, there was a story in this. So he's from Stockton, California, and some small Stockton newspaper got a hold of Darion Grimm and talked to him for a little bit. And he actually said some pretty scathing things, I think, about Riley and Langsdorff in terms of just saying, they promised me I was going to get playing time. That didn't seem like that was going to happen. And, they said that they were going to do this scheme, and that didn't happen. And so I think he was uncomfortable because he never thought he got a chance, which is, the way I kind of thought of it was like, okay, you come in and you're a journalism major. You don't expect on your third day of school to get a sit-down interview with Sean Eichhorst. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, if you're a receiver, you can't really expect to come in and get insane amount of playing time, right? Especially when you have incredible wide receivers that Nebraska has right now. It was just kind of it was one of those things where I think he might have been looking for reasons to leave. Maybe he just wasn't comfortable with Lincoln. He's from California. Maybe he didn't want it to be cold. You never really know.
Right.
So it was shocking to a certain extent because he was a big get for Keith Williams. He's like one of his first wide receiving signs. So on that end, it's kind of surprising. But at the same time, the way I always, looking at recruiting, I always have to remember these kids are 17, 18, 19 years old. So you never really know what's going on in their head. You never really know, if they decided for the right reasons, all that. In terms of depth at receiver, it doesn't hurt at all this year. I don't think it hurts Nebraska at all. I think receiving depth right now is probably the main thing that Nebraska doesn't have to worry about.
Right.
But next year, I think it hurts a little bit, but I don't think it hurts terribly. Next year, you still have a senior, DeMornay Pearsonell, a junior, Stanley Morgan Jr. Reams is coming on pretty well. You have Keyshawn Johnson Jr. coming in. You have Javon McQuitty coming in, who are both more highly touted than Darion Grimm was. And then you also kind of have to throw in the factor of what if Nebraska ends up signing Joseph Lewis, who is the number 3 recruit, or number 3 wide receiver in the country in the 2017 class, and he's visiting during the Oregon game, I believe it is. So if they score him, then it doesn't even matter, because next year Joseph Lewis might be the number 3 wide receiver, and Darion Grimm would have gotten down even more. You also have to add on to that, if you want to be a total optimist, is what if Nebraska ends up signing Darnay Holmes, and Darnay Holmes decides he wants to be a wide receiver, and then you have another receiver. So it's kind of like, I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. Like, I think they lacked a little bit of depth, but I don't think it's, wide receiver is kind of one of those things where Nebraska's going to end up being fine in the end because they just have so much talent. So it hurts a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be drastic.
Yeah, one more question for us. Thanks, Tommy, for those first two. One position of worry that I've been hearing a lot about this past week or so is that left guard after the injury to possible starter Gerald Foster. Danny Langsdorff has tossed around several names of guys who would possibly replace him, including Bo Wilson and others. Corey Whitaker's return from his knee scope is still in question as well, though he should be back within a week or so. In your eyes, who appears to be the lead candidate at that spot right now to replace Foster?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to kind of watch the offensive line a lot of the time because they're, I don't know if it's purposeful or not, but they usually practice on the opposite side, like as far away as possible from the media. So it's kind of hard to see sometimes. What I've heard and kind of what I've seen is I think Bo Wilson might end up scoring that position. That offensive line is going to be something that's going to be a work in progress. And I don't really know if we'll know if that offensive line is going to be figured out until, honestly, probably the Oregon game. Fresno State and Wyoming, they're kind of tune-up games. They'll basically be, there's not really any huge danger that Nebraska's going to lose those games. So I think we'll really find out about that offensive line come the Oregon game. But even then, Oregon has a pretty terrible defense, and Brady Hoke even actually said that yesterday, that they still look terrible. So I don't know. It'll be maybe till Big Ten season that we don't know how the offensive line is gonna end up melding. But even so, the offensive line is going to be huge this year because you're going to need to give Tommy Armstrong time, and you're going to need to open up holes for Terrell Newby and Divine Ozigbo because they're not super great at creating their own holes. So I don't know if I can really say specifically who I think is going to end up being the starter. I assume it's going to be Bo Wilson, kind of who we've seen more than anyone else. But the offensive line as a whole is kind of what I think people might be a little bit more worried about because there's a lot of question marks surrounding it.
Hey, Chris, this is Reid Hunsaker. I got a question for you here. Danny Langsdorff came out Wednesday after practice mentioning about the sloppiness that he saw in the 2-minute drill. Mike Riley also came out and said the same thing about the 2-minute offense after Saturday's scrimmage at Memorial Stadium. Should this be a concern to fans at all that this 2-minute offense is still having noticeable problems with just under a week left in the year? And, also considering last year, there's so many games that came down to that 2-minute line.
Yeah,
right
that's probably my number one concern for Nebraska is the way is honestly it's Tommy Armstrong, because that's kind of what it comes down to. A lot of people are kind of putting in stock the whole 2-minute drill. That's what the drill it is. But what I've seen more than anything is just the way that Tommy Armstrong hasn't really progressed like people thought. I really think I could probably count on one or two hands how many great throws he's had, because for every good throw or every good completion, there's a ball in the turf or there's a bobbled snap or something. And I actually wrote a story that published this morning basically looking at, how the volume of throws that Tommy Armstrong has, the more he throws, the worse Nebraska does, essentially. I found some stat that, since 2014, Tommy has thrown he's thrown more than 30 times in 11 games, and in those games, Nebraska's only won 4 of them. So it's one of those things where it's like you really don't want to be worrying about your senior quarterback a week before the game or a week before the season starts. But it's just one of those things where Tommy, I don't think, has really come around all the way. And it's one of those things because you kind of have to give him the benefit of the doubt. You have 2 totally different offensive schemes in his 4 years. You have 2 drastically different coaches. There was one year, I think it was his redshirt sophomore year when he was a starter. They didn't have a quarterback coach, and then his junior year they did, and now it's totally. I mean, it's just completely different. It's just a totally different thing now than it was when he came in, and so he's gone through a lot of different teams, so he hasn't really had one scheme to figure out through his 4 years. But at the same time, I mean, you're a Division I college football quarterback. Like at a certain point, you have to become, someone who doesn't make mistakes, like throwing a pick 6 on your own 5-yard line against Iowa, or not knowing what the play is on 3rd and 7 at Illinois. Things like that. So that would be my number 1 and 2 concern. Like going into the season is Tommy Armstrong going to figure it out? Is he going to stop making dumb mistakes and actually become the player that we all think that he can be? I think, like us in the media, we've been waiting for him to kind of become the best quarterback in the Big Ten, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And he just hasn't made that step yet. So yeah, that would be number 1, and then number 2 would be, can that 2-minute offense figure it out as well?
Right.
Because obviously, last year they couldn't, and with this 2-minute drill, again, obviously they can't. So it's kind of like, are they going to figure it out, and is that going to come down to play? Is that going to become a huge deal again, come like Big Ten play?
Yeah, it just gives you flashbacks to that Illinois game when Tommy went like 10 for 31, the 4 picks against Iowa. Yeah, I mean, when those things happen as a third-year starter, it gives you worries going back to last year, and then hearing this from Langsdorf in just camp, is a big concern. Chris Heady from landof10.com is our guest here on Beyond the Arc. One last question for you, Chris, here. First game is 8 days away. This has obviously been a very difficult offseason for a variety of reasons. Maybe something else could happen between now and Saturday, knock on wood. I mean, the suspensions, that's just another kind of ripple in this whole story. But it seems to me that in the press conferences that you and I have been to, like the big Keith Williams statement was last week, in moments like that, in situations like that, to me, it seems like the team and the coaching staff, they've handled the distractions and the hardships pretty well. I mean, that first press conference of the year, obviously the passing of Sam Foltz was a big talking point, but it seems like they all handled it with dignity and they were all composed and said all the right things. So it seems like on the surface that this team is handling the distractions pretty well. But now as a head coach, how does Riley, along with the staff, kind of funnel out the distractions and focus solely on Fresno State? Because like we saw last year against BYU, you had the PA announcer firings, you had the 5 suspensions and all of that. So kind of like last year, how does Riley funnel all of that extra stuff out and just get this team to focus solely on the task at hand? How do you do that as a head coach?
Right, no, and that's kind of that's why he gets paid the big bucks and I don't. No, I mean you make a good point. Like it's gonna be difficult, I think, for him because there's so much that's gone on in this fall camp, and I think people are kind of attributing it to it, like a lot of things happen in fall camp all the time. Like everything will be fine, but the things that have happened in this fall camp are things that don't usually happen in a season. Having a player died tragically in a car crash, like that is not something that's not just like a fall camp happening. That's something that's going to last for a long time. And then on top of that, you have a head coach who gets a DUI the weekend that a 5-star recruit is there. It's his 3rd DUI and he stays on. There's national media attention for it. That doesn't always happen either. So it's kind of these things like this fall camp and this off season have just been things that could have really lasting effects. Mm-hmm. With that though, I think it's one of those things where one of those fall camps where, it's frustrating, and I think Riley kind of showed his frustration yesterday at the press conference when he announced suspensions. He looked pretty visibly upset. He was really short with the media. He didn't really want to talk about it. He kind of left pretty quickly. But it might be one of those things where we don't necessarily see the coming together. It's one of those things where, 30 minutes before kickoff at Fresno State, he gets the team in the locker room and is like, listen, I get it. This is everything that's been going on has been absolutely crazy, but like this is our task at hand, and this is what you came to Nebraska for. and like let's put all of our energy, all of our focus, all of our frustration, all of our grief, like all of our hope, all into this one game and just take it one game at a time and go from there. So it's one of those things where, in tragedy or in, really hard times, sometimes a team can come together and a team can kind of find its identity when you strip away all the egos and all of the things that kind of ruin college football, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be one of those things where either the team totally comes together and we're going to see an incredibly special season, which could definitely happen, or it could be one of those things that this offseason was so much and there are so many distractions that there are just so many things going on that the team just completely crumbles. I think you saw that last year.
Right, yeah. Especially late in games.
Where
yeah.
There were just so many things going on around the program, just like the fact that Bo Pelini wasn't there, I think, was enough.
Right,
so
right. Coaching change.
Why mentally everyone kind of thing went to crap. So I don't know. I don't know how Mike Riley's going to do it, but I think he will. But at the same time, I'm as much as I'd like to be, I'm not in the locker room, so I wish I could kind of hear what his message is going to be a couple days before the Fresno State game, or even like the day of.
Right, yeah, it'd be fun to be a fly on the wall in that situation. Well, Chris, we're all out of time. Thank you so much. A lot to unpack this fall camp, as you said, but we appreciate you joining the show, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you in the coming weeks.
Yep, sure, yeah, thanks, Tommy. Yeah, call anytime. I'm always just finishing up recruiting notebooks, and I was the whole time we've been talking, I was standing on my porch in 70-degree weather, and it's been phenomenal. So
yeah, it's
I'm ready
beautiful.
For football season as much as you guys are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Chris Heady from landoften.com, our guest on Beyond the Arc. Yeah, beautiful fall day out there, cloudy skies, 70 degrees. Kind of reminds me of a Friday before a football game, but we still got to wait a whole week. We'll maybe return to some of those football topics as we go along, but we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, Brent Wagner from the Lincoln Journal-Star, beat writer for Nebraska Volleyball, they kick off their season tonight. So fall sports in Lincoln start tonight, except volleyball is on the road at Eugene, Oregon, taking on the Florida Gators in the Vert Challenge. Brent will preview the tough competition that Nebraska has to face, and we'll look at the returning talent and what John Cook expects out of his team this coming year. And Kellan Havikan has stepped in the studio, one of the co-hosts of BTA from day one. So we'll hear from Kellan when we return as well. Beyond the Arc, KRNU2.
From Anderson Hall on UNL campus in downtown Lincoln, Nebraska, this is Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming live at krnu.unl.edu.
Welcome back in. This is Beyond the Arc on KRNU2. Our thanks to Chris Heady from landoften.com for joining us on Nebraska football, and we'll be touching on that this week and next as in our full college football preview. That's coming up next week. Tommy Rezach, Zach Penrice, Reid Hunsaker, Kellan Havikan, a full cast of characters on hand for today's show. And now joining us on the Beyond the Arc Nothing But Net hotline is the Nebraska volleyball beat writer for the Lincoln Journal-Star. The preseason #1 ranked Huskers are in Eugene, Oregon tonight to kick off their season at the Vert Challenge in Eugene, Oregon, and they face #10 Florida tonight at 6 o'clock Central to kick off the year. And Brent is here, and he'll give us a season preview, kind of break down tonight's challenge. All right, so let's kick things off here. The Nebraska volleyball team, very tough draw to start the year. I mean, they started with Tulsa last year at Bob Devaney Sports Center. Now they're playing this challenge tournament this weekend. They face #10 Florida tonight at 6, and then a rematch with #2 Texas on Saturday at 5:30. I guess, Brent, for a team that's looking to repeat as national champions, in your mind, is this good or maybe a little bit too daunting to start the year with this big of a challenge? Head coach John Cook, he seems to embrace it, be ready for it, but what does this mean for a team that's looking to repeat? I mean, what does it mean to start with such a juggernaut in these first two games?
I just think it's great for college volleyball, really. I mean, I was looking at the amount of returning All-America. It seems like about half the All-Americans from last year are going to be in this, either for Texas. Florida has great middle blocker, one of the best, most athletic players. Nebraska's got 3 or 4 returning All-Americans, so it'll be tough. But Nebraska will certainly figure out what they need to work on, and maybe they're feeling too good about themselves, and this may humble them a little bit, or maybe this will, let them know how much their summer work helped out, and what they're capable of doing for the rest of the season. So it's going to be a great weekend, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And Florida's a team that was just a few points away from making that Final Four last year. They lost to Texas in set 5 of the Elite 8 last year. And the Gators, they returned 6'4", first-team All-American middle blocker Ramat Al-Hassan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And third-team All-American right setter Alex Holston. They also add Caroline Knopp, who's a transfer who played well against Nebraska when she was a Michigan Wolverine last year. So, they definitely have a plethora of talent. And then the Longhorns get back 6'4" outside hitter Ebony Nwanabu. Is that how you pronounce that one?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, yeah. She had 22 kills when Texas beat Nebraska early last season, but then she missed the rest of the year with an injury and did not get to play against the Huskers in the national championship. So, and I saw in your article here, Brent, that Nebraska junior setter Kelly Hunter, she's one of several players coming back, and she knows this match will mean a lot to fans. I mean, obviously it was so exciting watching them beat Texas in Omaha last year. She says, quote from your article, "I think there is a lot of hype for that just because we played for the title last year, but it's a new year and brand new teams and we can't be thinking about it, and we just need to play our game," end quote. So, it seems like their mind is in the right place. But, it'd be interesting to see I think if they split those two games, that'd be successful. But if they sweep, then, this team will definitely be living up to the hype. All right, so my next question for you, Brent. The Huskers, 32-4 last year. They win the program's 4th national title. Pretty huge accomplishment in and of itself, but John Cook said earlier this month at his press conference that kind of one of the goals, one of the themes is to, quote, dream bigger. What does he mean by that?
Well, I think the big emphasis is that Nebraska's never won back-to-back national championships. Very tough to do, but certainly Nebraska brings back a lot of its players, and the thing that is impressive is that they're good at every single position. Some years they've had a weakness. It all comes down to playing well when you're on the court. But they got Michaela Fecke at outside, who came on great and had a great Final Four. They're very, very, very good at middle blocker with Amber Ralston and Brianna Holman. Katie Ralston, obviously, at right side hitter, is one of the best players in the country. Mm-hmm. Kelly Hunters came on and was probably underappreciated how well she played at the end of the year to allow them to win a national championship. Justine Wongerantis at libero. Don Cook will probably tell you that he thinks she's the best player Nebraska has, just by playing defense and helping Nebraska be in the system. And then even though Nebraska doesn't have some of the elite outside hitters, maybe they're bringing in great players in the back row. So it's across the board. Nebraska is very, very good at every position. So they think they should win the national championship. They think should win the Big Ten championship, and they want to be elite this year. There's no doubt about that.
Hey, Brent, this is Kellan Avokin here, and you talked a little bit about Brianna Holman, and now you're adding Andy Malloy. Those two transfers now to basically the same team they had last year. How does John Cook and his coaching staff be able to balance basically the same team, but yet you're adding talent with keeping this chemistry and basically what Nebraska ended on a really good streak? How do you continue that through the offseason and now with a tough start to the 2016 campaign?
Well, I think they start just by getting their goals out there really early, and their goals obviously are to win the back-to-back national championships, something that the Nebraska team has done. So he's saying that it's a great program, but you have an opportunity to do something that's never been done. And then maybe even bigger is that this team hasn't won a Big Ten championship, and that's an equally as tough task, and I can't imagine how good these players would feel if they, especially this group of seniors, they were the number one recruiting class in the country when they came in, and they've been close, but they haven't won a Big Ten title. So it's going to be when you get into that conference season. That's 10 weeks where it kind of feels like you're in an NCAA tournament. So they definitely have a lot of stuff that they'd like to accomplish. You come to Nebraska to win national championships, but you also don't expect to. You expect to at least have a chance to win one Big Ten championship while you play volleyball in Nebraska, and this group hasn't done it yet. So I think you'll see a very, very focused team, especially once you get into that conference season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Did you have something to add there, Brent? I don't know if I cut you off.
No.
Oh, okay, yeah, I thought you were mid-sentence there. But Brent Wagner, the volleyball beat writer for the Lincoln Journal-Star, joining us this morning on Beyond the Arc. So, yeah, the two transfers that Kellan referenced to, Brianna Holman, transfer from LSU. She sat out last year. And then grad transfer, Andy Malloy. And she was impressive in the scrimmage last weekend. She notched 16 kills and 11 digs. I guess I want to ask you, Brent, that scrimmage going on about 6 days ago, was there anything besides Malloy's performance? Was there anything else that kind of jumped off the page as far as performance goes?
Oh, not really. I mean, I think people are excited to see what Bree Holman can do. She's improved a lot, but I mean, it's still going to be an adjustment. I think for her to get back from playing, she hasn't played, for a year. What Nebraska, the expectations for her at Nebraska are a lot bigger as far as blocking and how they're going to use her within the offense. So I think it was good to get her. I mean, that'll be a big thing is what she can do. Just seeing Malloy, I think. But also, I mean, that's not a given. I think Olivia Boonder will still get a chance to come in just because she's probably more of a physical, when they need somebody to just come in and bang away, that might be Olivia Boonder. So it was good to see Lauren Stivrins. Nebraska only has the two middle blockers, but they definitely want where if Amber or Brianna Holman hasn't having a good match, they want to bring Lauren Stivrins in and see what she can do.
Right, yeah, Lauren is the tallest player on that team. She's a true freshman out of Scottsdale, Arizona, stands 6'4". So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see her get in the lineup. And then they're not middle blockers, but Annika Albright and also Sydney Townsend are a couple players that are coming back that they kind of saw time off the bench. But Annika really shined, I thought, in the postseason tournament. So I think she'll have a lot to contribute this year as well. One last question before we let you go, Brent. Undoubtedly, the expectations are high for Nebraska. We've touched on it already. They've never repeated as national champs, as you've said. Ranked preseason number 1 for the first time since 2012. Unanimous favorites to win the Big Ten according to the preseason coaches poll. All 14 coaches in the conference voted them to win it. 4 seniors coming back and 6 players returning who have All-American accolades to some extent. In your mind, does it seem like maybe expectations and the pressure is a little too high? I mean, historically, this is John Cook's 17th year. It seems like he's always done a good job of funneling out the pressure and the distractions, but the target is certainly on Nebraska's back this year.
No, I don't think it's too much. Just because, like I said about them being good at every position. The chemistry was good at the end of last year. That's certainly a key. I mean, there's a lot of teams out there that have, and it's still the case where there's going to be teams, I would say, that are more athletic at many positions than Nebraska, and that may be the case today with Florida and tomorrow with Texas. But it's how those people can put it all together, play as a team. And I think Nebraska has showed that they did that very well last year, and they do that well. I mean, they're very, very good. They're probably not overwhelming athletically as some of the teams, but they'll have a chance to do very well this year.
Yeah, no question about it. It's going to be a fun night of volleyball and fun weekend overall. Again, Nebraska plays 10th-ranked Florida at 6 o'clock tonight, and then 5:30 tomorrow, number 2 Texas in a national championship rematch. Both of those games can be heard live with John Baylor and Diane Mendenhall on the Husker Sports Network. And Brent Wagner will have full coverage this weekend in the Lincoln Journal-Star, and you can go on journalstar.com or pick up a copy of the paper and see Brent's work all season long. Brent, we appreciate you coming on the show and giving us a good season preview there. Thanks for the time.
Okay, have a good day.
Yeah, you as well. Brent Wagner from the Lincoln Journal-Star joining us on the Beyond the Arc Nothing But Net hotline. So, Kellan, since you kind of came in late, Kellan has another class, so we're going to try and get him some airtime here. So I know you follow a lot of high school sports and volleyball, and, you had the chance to call some volleyball on BTN Plus last year. I mean, you had a good question there for Brent. So I guess how do you see this volleyball team going into 2016?
Well, John Cook, and Brent kind of touched on it, has always been able to basically make the pressure just kind of disappear when obviously the pressure continues to mount. My biggest concern for this team is how do you manage the talent? You've got basically the returning team that won that championship a year ago, and now you're adding Brianna Holman to the mix, and you're adding Malloy. And Malloy, an interesting player in herself because she's already transferred from a couple of schools already, so is that going to throw a wrench into the mix? So at least, guys, from where I look at this volleyball team, yes, they should go out and they should win the Big Ten hands down, but we all know that the Big Ten is one of the, if not the best conference in volleyball in terms of teams being up there like Minnesota. Purdue's a good one. Obviously, you've got Penn State as well. So, and like Minnesota, for example, if you would happen to go back and look at that tournament, and if Minnesota and Nebraska do match up, I looking at that tournament, I thought Minnesota was going to be able to get Nebraska. So you got Hugh McCutcheon as the Minnesota head coach, who used to be the Olympics head coach for volleyball. So he's been around the block or two, and obviously we know about Penn State. So I think the biggest question is John Cooks has got to be able to manage the talent and put his players in the best position that he sees fit in order to put them in a position to win the games. Whether that is, last year we saw him switch around his outside hitters and his middle blockers, and that's really what made Nebraska turn the corner last year. So in terms of what's going to happen this year, how is the addition of Holman and Malloy going to change the team dynamic? If you want to become a good team, you've got to kick the excuses out the door.
I had some extra time in the production studio. But no, all good points there. I'm really excited to see how the season goes. And they will be the Nebraska volleyball team in town Friday, September 2nd on Husker Football Eve, if you will. They kick off the home schedule against Iowa State. That's a 6 o'clock start from the Devaney Center. BTN Plus will have coverage, so a couple of College of Journalism students will be on the call. And then on the actual football game day at 2:30, with football being at 7, the Huskers play Oregon State at 2:30 at the Bob Devaney Sports Center. And Kellen, before we go to break, I did want to get also your input. Darion Grimm leaving the program. Also, Darion Grimm and then the Riley Gary suspension. So I guess what was as a KRNU sports staff member, a guy who follows the team pretty well, I guess your overall reaction and analysis to two of those things?
I read an article today about why Darion Grimm, and it was from where he is originally from.
Yeah, Chris Heady talked about it.
And basically he said, comes down to, Coach Riley said, we're going to run 4 wide receivers. I've got a really good chance of playing time. And he comes here and he doesn't get that opportunity. And Chris talked about it, so I won't beat that. But I guess what I take away, and this goes back to the Keith Williams situation and the suspensions and now Grimm leaving, things happen for a reason. If it's not going to work out, it's not going to work out. No need to smash a square peg through a round hole, which might be what the Grimm situation would be. And in terms of Riley and Gary, you guys are football players. You're representative of your team, and the university got to be smarter than that. Obviously, I think it was one of them. I think was arrested or something like that for DUI, and I'm not sure what the other one was suspended for. But you've got to use your head. And Coach Riley has always said since day one, we've got to do things the right way, and that's exactly what apparently those guys didn't do. So we'll see what happens. And I think Mike Riley is the guy that is going to be able to get this team to play the way they need to play in terms of handling the adversity. We talked about Sam Foltz, and as you just continue to add things to the mix, he is that right guy. But the question is, do they believe in Coach Riley? I think is the bigger factor on the players in terms of is he going to be able to put us in the best position to win games? I think it really relies this point on the players issue because, offensively they've got the talent. Defensively, they've made some changes and look to improve. So it's whether or not the players can believe in their coaches. And I think that's the issue that you'll see. We'll have to see how it plays out through 2016.
Yeah, good stuff. I was going to do like a spiel on the whole Darion Grimm situation, but I wanted to get your thoughts. Yeah, it's recordnet.com that article comes from, so maybe we'll talk about that in the next hours. We've reached the top of the noon hour here, so we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we continue on the Nebraska sports cycle, I should say, with Nebraska ball. Seems a little bit early with the season still about 2.5 months away, but a couple of big stories in Nebraska ball. One dealing with recruiting, we'll get to that, and also the Big Ten schedule was released just yesterday. So lots to unpack with that. And me and Zach, we've covered the team. Kellan's covered the team. Reid's talked about the team with us. So a lot of strong opinions about Tim Miles and his recruiting and his credibility. So we're going to get into that when we return and look at the schedule and see what's reasonable for expectations for Husker basketball this coming year. We break that all down next. Beyond the Arc, KRNU2.
Stay tuned for more Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming live at krnu.unl.edu.
Broadcasting from the Roy Lenwell studios of Anderson Hall at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming live on the web at krnu.unl.edu.
Our thanks to Brent Wagner and Kellan Havikin for chipping in that segment. Kellan had to rush off to class, but glad to have him aboard. Tommy Rezach, Zach Penrice, Reid Hunsaker here with you. If you missed our interview with Brent Wagner or Chris Heady, it'll be on the podcast this afternoon. We'll get that posted. Go to youtube.com and search Beyond the Arc. And if you want to hear some of our work from last year, just to kind of get a taste of what we're all about on Beyond the Arc and what we do here, we actually do work hard, contrary to popular belief. But no, there is some good stuff on there from last year. And of course, yeah, we'll be here every Friday from 11 to 1 with more current stuff. So Nebraska basketball is actually going to have Nick Gebhardt from the Daily Nebraskan in here, but he's also in class. So a lot of people busy with their academics today. But like I said, me and Zach and Reid, we know this team well enough. There's obviously some pretty big news out of Nebraska ball this week, and this came out, I think it was Wednesday, that Agawek Arop, who was the youngest ever player to commit to Nebraska men's basketball, he's an Omaha South standout. Well, he reopened his recruiting just a couple of days ago. He was the first in-state high school player to commit to Nebraska since 2002, and apparently Tim Miles said he wasn't ready. Tim Miles wanted Agawek Arop to spend a year at prep school before coming to Nebraska, and Arop said, well, you know what? I don't want to spend a year before starting college. So Arop is reopening his commitment. Still no word. I mean, this just happened a couple days ago, so it's there's no word on where he's going to go. But, yeah, interesting story, and really a lot of back and forth comments on this. Bruce Chubbuck told the Omaha World Herald this week that he said, yeah, I was frustrated with Miles. He said, I expressed my displeasure. I said, this kid's definitely ready. He's like, I've had a couple of veterans I've coached that were on Nebraska's team in the 90s. And he said, Agawek Arop is way ahead of those two players that I sent to Nebraska. I mean, Chubbuck's been there for years. So he's like, I don't understand Miles' thinking, but he's got to do what he's got to do. And so in the past 2 months, Zach Penrice, you now have the departure of Andrew White III, and now Arop, the longest-standing Nebraska basketball commit ever, reopening his recruitment after committing to Nebraska 2 years ago, the first in-state commit since 2002. From a recruiting standpoint, from an image standpoint, from a credibility standpoint, how big of a loss is this?
Well, the first reaction, or my initial reaction, is he says that he's not ready. I can name 5 or 6 current players that aren't ready for college basketball that he's been bringing in, like we've been saying. And then obviously losing Andrew White this offseason hurts. And now we have a Rop that is like you said, the longest standing recruit for Nebraska to come here, and it just really hurts the image. You've got Creighton down the road an hour away that is scooping in-state kids every single year, and they have Kyrie Thomas and Justin Patton, who were the best players in the state back-to-back years. And it reminds me a lot of what Creighton did with Kyrie Thomas. Kyrie Thomas took a year off between high school and college, went to a small academy, played basketball there, developed his game a little bit, came to Creighton, and now he's going to be a beast for them there for the next few years. And apparently Agawek Arop didn't want to do that. So I have no idea where he's going to go. It's, in my opinion, a huge loss for Nebraska. It's simply because it's an in-state kid. You have the local people that are into it because they've been watching him for years. And so I personally been watching this kid since he was a sophomore in high school, tearing it up at Omaha South. So, yeah, not a good thing for the Nebraska basketball program from any standpoint at all.
Was I pronouncing it wrong? Is it Agawek Arop?
It's a Gook, just a Gook. It's a mouthful. It's Agawek Arop. It's simple.
Yeah, I know. There we go. Yeah, I've been pronouncing it wrong. My bad.
No, you're all right.
Reid, I want to get you in on this as well, but I don't know if y'all read Mad Chatter with Dirk Chatelain from the Omaha World Herald. I've really gained a lot of respect for Dirk lately. I was talking to Chris earlier in the show about the big Keith Williams press conference and the crazy day of Husker news that was with I. and Riley speaking, and I really respected Dirk because he asked the tough questions. I was never a huge fan of him earlier, but I like the work he's been churning out lately. All right, that's enough of the plug. But the reason I say that is because he wrote in his latest Mad Chatter, this was yesterday or Wednesday. The days are just all running together here in the first week of class. But Dirk had a really good take, and it's pretty much in line with my opinion on it. So I'll just read a few excerpts from this, and then we'll get Reid Hunsaker here on the conversation. But Dirk starts off by saying, following back-to-back losing seasons and 2 months after its best player abandoned the team, Andrew White, Nebraska basketball has dumped the top senior in the state, a player who committed 2 years ago as a 15-year-old and struck with the Huskers as they regressed toward the Big Ten basement. The reason? Aguk Arap hadn't developed the way Tim Miles envisioned. I got it. Miles, according to Lee Barfnecht earlier this week, wanted Arap to attend a prep school after his senior season at Omaha South, where he is now, where he led the Packers to a Class A title in March. This is one of my favorite quotes. So Miles wanted him to go to a prep school after his senior year. Here's Dirk. That's sort of like telling your fiance you'll follow through on your engagement if the plastic surgery goes well. Oh, I love it. Arap, the first in-state high school player to commit to Nebraska since 2002, this is Dirk, is not the next Denzel Valentine. He may not be Siobhan Shields or A-Dub III. He's an undersized small forward with a shaky jump shot and a torn ACL on his record. But if there were ever, the word ever in all caps, if there were ever a time to stand by a promise and give a recruit the benefit of the doubt, this is it. More from Dirk. Arap is a solid kid whose biggest strength is competitiveness. He could walk in the door at PBA tomorrow and crack Nebraska's rotation, partly because Nebraska's rotation isn't very good. Now, I think that's a little bit arguable with the recruiting that Miles has done lately and with Glenn Watson, Michael Jacobson, the returning talent from last year, but I agree. I mean, it's not the best rotation in the conference. Miles has given multiple scholarships to kids who couldn't play Big Ten basketball, several of whom remained on the roster after it was clear they wouldn't contribute, Jake Hammond, a few of whom are slated to be on the team at least 2 more years, Nick Fuller. Yet this is a time to hold a prospect to a higher standard? One more paragraph from Dirk, then I'll get reading. Miles is the most savvy public relations coach I have ever observed in any sport. This makes the decision that much more astonishing. It's a slap in the face to in-state basketball at a moment when Miles cannot afford to disrespect any supporters, especially the high school player of the year in Nebraska, who resides in an emerging hoops town where kids have consistently ignored the Big Red. And Zach, I'm really glad you brought up Kyrie Thomas because he and Justin Patton are 2 excellent recent examples of kids who have come out of Omaha that go to Creighton. They never even consider Lincoln. They go to Creighton, and look what they're doing. Kyrie's like, what, second team all Big East, something like that?
No, he's playing great basketball there, and Justin Patton just sat out a year, so he's going to be a redshirt freshman this year. He'll be coming off the bench to replace Zach Hansen on their team, and how can he possibly think that Aguk Arap will not come in here and contribute? He will come in and contribute immediately if he is on this team next year.
Right.
It's the best player in the state, and he's not. I mean, Nebraska high school basketball is not the best in the Midwest or even close to the best in the country, but to be the best player in the state, that's a big deal. He won a state championship. They're probably going to win another one this year.
Right.
I mean, it just seems crazy to me that Aguk Arap would not be a high priority for Tim Miles.
And you probably had the chance to watch Patton in high school a little bit.
A lot, yeah.
So how? Yeah. I mean, just like general scout, is he pretty good then? Like we haven't seen him as a Blue Jay, but is he pretty good athletically? From what you saw,
I think that later on in the season, I mean, he had a couple games where he'd put up 30 points, grab 18 rebounds. So he'd get double-doubles where he'd almost get 20 rebounds and over 30 points in games. And then you have Kyrie Thomas, who, let's say, I watched him play at Creighton Prep where I went, and Kyrie dunked on us 3 times in a game.
Wow.
And I never actually, I mean, I only saw Aguk Arap play once because I was a senior the year he tore his ACL.
Right.
So, I mean, but he is definitely the real deal. There's no question about it. And the fact that he has a lot of similarities to the dominance of Kyrie Thomas and Justin Patton. And the fact that he was this close to coming to Lincoln, and now he's not coming anymore. It honestly wouldn't surprise me if he ends up at Creighton right now. Honestly, it would be a slap in the face in Nebraska, but that would not surprise me one bit.
Well, yeah, and Kyrie, he's certainly given Nebraska fits. He gave him fits last year. I think he played 2 years ago, possibly.
Just last year was his first year.
Okay, yeah, he was a freshman. My bad.
Right.
But yeah, Creighton has beat Nebraska the last 5 times in a row, and it looks like it's going to continue.
Going up.
It's going to continue. So, Reid, my question for you is. I mean, like with me and Zach just talking about these Omaha stars that develop, like Nebraska's barely even on their radar. And finally, when they get a kid who's willing to commit as a 15-year-old, the first in-state commit in 14 years, and now he's gone, how much harder does this make it for Miles to have a shot at landing any in-state prospect? That's not a walk-on.
I agree with both of you. I think it's very, questionable to come out and, tell a guy that, we don't think you're ready to play after you have signed the guy at age 15 and gave him a scholarship. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work with what Tim Miles has wanted to do when he first came in. It just doesn't match up, in my opinion. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, one more paragraph from Dirk. The irony here is how quickly it follows Andrew White's betrayal, which was like, mid-July? Yep. The 6'7" senior left town largely because he didn't think the Huskers were good enough for him, and Husker fans were rightly ticked off, myself included. Now, Nebraska is doing the same to Arop. And for what? Is there a line of top 100 recruits begging to come to Lincoln? No. If Nebraska thinks other prospects are better, then it better get them. If Nebraska thinks other prospects are better, then they better get them. I've seen this story too many times, says Dirk. NU passes on a local kid, ends up with a 2-star from Arkansas or Michigan who can't play a lick. Whether Arop turns into a Big Ten starter isn't really the point. Miles understood the risk of offering a 15-year-old. He should have honored his commitment. And that's kind of what I grapple with the most. I mean, you had a high school sophomore who was, climbing the ladder really quick, ahead of the game for his age, and he said, Coach, I want to play for Nebraska. Miles is like, heck yeah, we'll put you in the red uniform, you'll play in Pinnacle Bank Arena, and then 2 years later, I like you, but it's not you, it's me, maybe come back in a year. No. Yeah, I don't understand. So, Zach, back to the Andrew White thing. In the last 2 months, you've had him announce that he's leaving. Now, Arop opens up his recruiting. Say what you will, but from a national standpoint, both of these things damage Nebraska's image and credibility. That being the case, given this latest debacle, how can Miles restore the energy and restore some optimism within this program?
Can't. In my opinion, it's like, I don't even, at the end of last season when Nebraska lost in the Big Ten tournament, what did we say? Well, at least we have Andrew White next year. I mean, that's just kind of what everyone said. Andrew White's going to put on a show. He's going to score 30 points a game. He's going to be first team all Big Ten. And now we don't have that. So, I mean, and when you say damage their image and credibility, we're talking about a team that finished, third, fourth to last in the Big Ten last year, and they had Siobhan and Andrew White on that team.
Right.
Now they don't have either of them.
You got to rely on Anton Gill. Anton Gill's your star, and he sat out a year.
Yeah, he has not even played a second for Nebraska, and you're talking about a guy that's supposed to come in here and just carry the load for him. Glenn Watson, all these guys are good players, but they all have the same role. They're all role players. That's just kind of the thing. Right. They've kind of been guys that come in, they score 5-10 points a game, and they let Siobhan and Andrew White do their thing. And now we need guys to be focusing up and scoring a lot of points every game, and there is no guy on this team that can, or in my opinion, will do that. And so I think that the optimism for this program is as low as it's ever been.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Yeah, you got to have fun with this. So, Reid, the other big story that, it's almost like so frustrating that you kind of have to try and laugh about it. I mean, even though I've been waiting for, I've been a Nebraska ball fan for over a decade, and I was just unbelievably thrilled when we made the tournament 2 years ago. But yeah, I've said it. This year is make or break. If they don't make NIT, Miles is as good as gone in my book. I've been a supporter of Tim. I think he's a good PR guy. I think he's a good media guy. I mean, he's done 10 times the recruiting Doc Sadler ever did. But, if you can't develop, if you can't reap the benefits, then obviously there's a problem. And, in-state recruiting has been a big question around this program for over a decade, dating back to the Doc Sadler era. So now when you finally get an Omaha South star to, it's a miracle when an Omaha kid even looks at Nebraska. But when you got a 15-year-old who commits, and then after 2 years you break up with it, it's like breaking up with him over a text. You're just like, I'm done with you. So, yeah, I've been a supporter of Miles, but and Andrew White III. You can't levy, in my opinion, all of the blame. But it's like he never really gave any specific things. The Huskers just aren't for me. It's like Chris Heady said in our interview, relating to football, we're not in the locker room. We don't know. So that always just kind of raises an eyebrow. What the heck do you mean? I'm uncomfortable here. So, yeah, it makes you wonder kind of what's going on. But shifting gears a little bit here, Reid, the other big story was yesterday when the Big Ten Conference released their regular season basketball schedule. And me and Zach were talking before the show. It's going to be a kick right below the belt immediately. You go at Indiana December 28th. You follow that up with a road game at Maryland on New Year's Day. Happy 2017, Tim Miles. But overall, Nebraska gets some pretty solid teams at PBA this year. They got Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I think 5 of those 6 made the NCAA tournament last year. They'll be in Lincoln. Looking at that conference draw, I mean, Zach, he's probably thinking 2-20. But looking at that conference draw, what would be, in your mind, a reasonable expectation for a number of conference wins this coming season?
I would say to get a couple big wins at home, just try to get a little bit of momentum from what has been, a draining offseason for the basketball program here. So if you can go out and if you can beat, Purdue or a Michigan State or Ohio State, one of those teams at home, I think that gives a little bit of momentum going into next year. It's basically like having a huge tower of what Tim Miles has built up. You pull out a Jenga block, and that's Andrew White III. You pull out another one, and that's the recruit we were talking about earlier leaving. And it's just pretty much all collapsed now. And what I think the basketball program needs to do now is just slowly gain momentum, try to get that swagger back that we did have a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a long process, but like Zach said, is it already too late?
Tommy, looking at this conference schedule, I see 18 games. I see, I mean, you guys probably disagree, and I'm sorry for being the least optimistic person about this team. No. But I see 3 wins out of those. I see a 3-15 conference schedule, and it's looking at this, it's brutal. I mean, it just is. The Big Ten is going to be very good this year, and starting off with Indiana.
It is every year. Yep.
And this is a team that thrives off of just being in the moment and playing well off of big wins. And you start off with Indiana and Maryland, that could just kill the momentum right then and there, because those two last non-con games, Gardner-Webb and Southern, will probably be wins, and so the hype will be real, and then they'll go to Indiana and Maryland.
After beating Gardner-Webb, the hype will be real.
Yeah.
Hey, Southern wasn't.
It won't be the hype will be real, but they'll be in the zone a little bit more,
As we are. Like, doesn't that always seem like the case? Like, we're about 4 or 5 games above a 500 coming out of conference play. Like, oh, you know what? We got some wind in our sails, and it's just like loss. This
is going to be bad.
Beat Penn State, loss. Yeah, it's just, I'm sick of it. Yeah, and Southern is at home. That's a team that made the tournament a couple years ago. They actually almost beat the 1 seed Gonzaga. Obviously, that was 2 years ago, but that just came to mind. But I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to go through the conference schedule. I'm going to say if it's a win or a loss. Indiana, loss. Maryland, at Indiana, loss. At Maryland, loss. Iowa at home, Iowa's good, loss. Northwestern at home, I'll say win.
That's a toss-up.
I think they take a step back from, they started off hot last year and they sunk, so I don't think they're going to be great. So I'll give Northwestern a win. At Michigan, loss. Ohio State, off year last year, they'll reload, loss. At Rutgers, win. So that's 2.
I agree.
At Northwestern, close loss. Okay, so I'm up to 2. Purdue at home, loss. Michigan State at home, Miles knows Michigan State, win. So that's 3. He's beaten Tom Izzo the last 4 years in a row?
Yeah, but now they have him twice on the schedule.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, didn't they? No, they didn't have him twice on the schedule before, so that'll be interesting. At Iowa, loss. Wisconsin at home, loss. Penn State at home, win. So I'm up to 4. Well, at Ohio State, loss. At Michigan State, loss. Illinois at home, okay, I'll say win. I'm up to 5. Illinois is good. I think they're an NIT team. At Minnesota, loss. Michigan at home, loss. All right, I got 5. Reid, what do you think?
3 to 5 around that.
I'm telling you, you guys were looking at me like I was crazy, and then you go through it, and you're just like, wow, this is going to be bad.
And 5, the hard thing is 5 is like pretty optimistic.
I know. Like, I had to grapple with it a little bit. 3 of my 5 wins are like coin flips, so it's tough.
I think they can do it.
I think 3 of them. College basketball, it is what it is. There's going to be upsets. Like I said, I think we have 5 teams coming to Lincoln in the conference that made the tournament last year. Hell, even Doc Sadler beat Indiana his first year in 2011, and that team was terrible. And so I think you maybe get one court storm opportunity. You might beat a good team, a team with a win. I'm not saying you beat a ranked team, but maybe like a Northwestern that's like 20-11 when they came to Lincoln last year. So I think maybe they'll get an upset.
Storm in the court for Northwestern.
It's Lincoln. You got to take what you can get.
It's about as low as you can go.
I'd say Rutgers would be worse if we're talking basketball. But no, I think we'll get like one upset. But yeah, and then Tim Miles says it every year. The Big Ten's a grind, and when you lose your best player and you're only in-state recruit in 14 years, it's going to be even a bigger grind. And Zach, one last question on Nebraska ball, and then we'll go to break. No conference games being played on Saturday this year. Does this spell drawback from attendance or recruiting standpoints?
100%. Yeah, I mean, no game on a Saturday. It definitely hurts recruiting first off, but I mean, also with attendance, it's not necessarily the date with this team as far as what they're putting on the floor, and it's just, I mean, I'm sorry to be that guy, but it definitely is going to hurt attendance. This program, I will give them that. They have a very good attendance record for their legacy in basketball, and because they haven't been producing great basketball teams really ever, and yet the attendance is still really good. So that's very cool, and I do love that a lot. Pinnacle Bank Arena is full a lot, and it'll be full for a lot of these games. Creighton really jumps out. Obviously, that game's full every time that it's here, so that'll be a really cool environment. And then most of these Big Ten games will be full too. Ohio State coming to town,
Yep.
Purdue, Michigan State. Despite what this team's going to be put on the floor this year, as far as basketball goes, I think that fans will still do a good job with filling it up. But like you said, yeah, non-con schedule is going to be a little rough, especially with Sacramento State and South Dakota and Gardner-Webb coming to town. I think there'll be some lighter attended games, but still I think they'll be top 15 in attendance despite not being a very good basketball team this year.
Just kick their butt.
Nope. Yeah. Sorry, I saw those two sound bites and it clicked in my head. But yeah, Sacramento State there's an exhibition game opponent to be determined. That's November 7th. Sacramento State is the first official game, November 13th. University of Mary.
Yep.
Where the heck is that? University of Mary, the 15th. Who are they? Louisiana Tech. That's better. Then they play the Wooden Legacy Tournament over Thanksgiving. They play, I think it's UCLA or they play Dayton on Thanksgiving night. Yeah, Thursday the 24th, and Black Friday, either UCLA or Portland. And then there'll be the championship game on Sunday the 27th, and then ACC Big Ten Challenge game at Clemson.
The University of Mary is in Bismarck, North Dakota.
All right.
It's just a little fun fact of the day. That's what we're looking for.
This is fun, right? We're having fun.
Good to know. University of Mary, that is the third game on the schedule. And then the conference home opener will be Iowa on Thursday, January 5th, and we'll have full coverage on KRNU as always. Well, that's going to do it for Nebraska ball talk. Good heated debate. There wasn't really much of debate. We're all kind of on the same page. This was bad. I mean, you're naive to think that Miles didn't drop the ball here. Miles didn't make a mistake. I mean, there is obviously some people that said, if he's not ready, he's not ready. What's the big excuse? And I kind of understand that, but it's you're Nebraska. You're number 130 in every category. You got to take what you can get. I mean, if you want to even have a chance of getting a streamline in your home state out of a rising basketball city, you've got to take somebody, especially somebody who was interested in you for 2 years. But that's no longer the case. We'll take a quick break. When we return, some college football headlines. Tim Beckman's back in the news, and it's not good, so we'll get to that. A new ripple in the Notre Dame Devin Butler guy, the guy who was arrested for having marijuana and a loaded handgun. There's a new ripple in that. And then the NCAA taking another step in this Ole Miss investigation. It's pretty interesting. And then Fresno State, they named a starting quarterback for next week. And then we look at some Heisman Trophy sleepers. Are there any Huskers on that list? We'll find out. So a lot of college football topics to tackle when we return. By the time we're back next Friday, there will have already been at least a couple of college football games in the books. So we'll talk the latest in college football news when we return. Beyond the Arc, KRNU2.
Stick around. More Beyond the Arc is coming up after the break.
Yes! 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 Yes!
On KRNU2, streaming online at krnu.unl.edu.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming worldwide at krnu.unl.edu.
Welcome back in. This is Beyond the Arc. Tommy Rezach, Zach Penrice, Kellan Havikin. We've had Chris Heady, Brent Wagner, Kellan. I already said Kellan's name. Chris Heady and Brent Wagner were our two guests earlier today. Again, if you've missed anything, we just had a good back and forth on Nebraska men's basketball and the latest drama with that with Aguk Arap, the Omaha South star that flipped his recruitment this week. If you missed any of that, check out the podcast at youtube.com and be sure to subscribe, up to 3 subscribers. So going pretty solid right there. All right, back to business. So starting with some college football headlines now. This was a report from CBSSports.com that I read this morning. The NCAA is expanding investigation to other SEC players recruited by Ole Miss. According to Yahoo Sports, it's a, quote, new twist. The NCAA is now interviewing other SEC players about the Rebels' recruiting practices. Since the NCAA does not have Sabone power, enforcement officials can get student athletes from other schools to offer their accounts of potential violations by granting immunity. According to the report, this is how NCAA officials are able to get interviews with players from Auburn, Mississippi State, and perhaps at least one more SEC Western Division school. Now, Ole Miss has accepted responsibility for 27 out of 28 alleged violations, but announced that they will have to fight at least five of them to have them lessened from level 2 to level 3 violations. There are 13 violations against Ole Miss football, 8 of them deemed to be level 1, the most serious kind, and 9 of the 13 occurred under the tenure of current coach Hugh Freeze. As a response to the allegations, the school plans to impose an 11 scholarship reduction in football, 1 scholarship from 2015, 2 from this year, and then 4 from 2017 and 18. So some of these allegations include representative of the institution's athletics interested provided football student athletes with impermissible extra benefits. Money. The football program failed to monitor the activities of representatives who gave 3 athletes loaner vehicles, giving them cars. A representative of the institution's athletics interest provided a football student with $800 cash in August of 2014, and so on and so forth. Lane Kiffin arranged for 3 family members of a recruit that were not his parents or guardians to receive impermissible recruiting inducements during his official visit. Monetary value $1,000. So basically just illicit benefits, whether it's cars or parents of recruits or just friends of recruits. Apparently all kinds of different benefits, lots of different violations. So obviously I don't think we've heard the last of this Ole Miss thing. So Zach, I'll start with you. Pretty crafty here by the NCAA to go after either current or former recruits from other SEC schools that Ole Miss had interest in. This is pretty crafty, going after guys that didn't end up going to Ole Miss, but maybe they were offered a little bit of something under the table. This could spell really even worse news for the Rebels.
No, it's smart for the NCAA to go about it in the way that they're going about it. But, I mean, you look down this list, it's a laundry list of allegations against Ole Miss. And, I mean, I've already been reading articles that say Ole Miss is on their way to the death penalty, and that could be a obviously terrible thing for the SEC, terrible thing for Ole Miss, obviously losing their football program. But that would just, I mean, that's kind of what they're looking at right now. I mean, if all this is really this true, and I always thought it was funny when you see self-imposed actions on a unit, like when they do this themselves, you know there's something bigger that they're hiding. And so it's completely
trying to be the good guys.
It's exactly like that. You foul somebody in basketball, you put your hands up immediately. I didn't touch him. That's exactly what it is. And so I've always thought that was funny, self-imposed, 11 scholarship reductions. That's like practically nothing in the grand scheme of things as far as what they're looking at as far with punishments from the NCAA.
Yeah, this all kind of started with Laramie Tunsil's leaked text messages back in 2016.
Right,
Their case, it came together kind of right around then, but then leaked text messages believed to involve Laramie Tunsil and an Ole Miss staffer on NFL draft night kind of really springboarded this investigation into the summer and now into the fall. And Ole Miss starts their season on Monday, September the 5th, on Labor Day, against Florida State, and that'll be played in Orlando. So we'll keep an eye on that. Hugh Freeze, I think he tried to play all. And Paul Feinbaum, I'll give a lot of credit, who is historically an SEC homer, was giving Hugh Freeze some tough questions, asking him the tough questions about the allegations, and Hugh was just all sorts of flustered and how dare you ask me these questions and all of that. So we'll continue to follow that, but yeah, do not expect good news for Ole Miss anytime soon. Shifting gears now to Notre Dame. The girlfriend of Notre Dame linebacker Devin Butler is now disputing a police account of arrest. The girlfriend of Butler is disputing that he's actually a cornerback. His arrest on Saturday, she said he was abused and wrongly arrested. Haley Bailey's her name. She told the South Bend Tribune that she was out the South Bend bar when Butler allegedly tackled a police officer and punched him during an altercation. She says, quote, "I was there that entire night. Reports say that everyone left the scene, but I was still there and saw everything the officers did to Devin. He was abused and wrongly arrested. He never tackled an officer, and he never intentionally hurt anyone. He had no reason to be tased because he was never resisting arrest." Butler faces felony counts of resisting law enforcement and battery against a public safety official. A not guilty plea was entered on his behalf Wednesday, and an initial hearing is set for September 1st. So, Reid, I guess your thoughts on this? I mean, we see this so many times with players getting in trouble with like going to bars and getting rowdy and hitting somebody. I mean, does this claim by Devin Butler's girlfriend mean anything really?
I don't know. It's just a bunch of speculation. I mean, can we just get football started up?
Please.
I mean, who do you have reporting on the story? Ryan Lochte? I mean,
That's football. Charles, it's football.
Yeah, no, it's been a whirlwind though in this offseason for sure.
And I mean, I'm all about, innocence before proven guilty and all of that. And, you talk about how many problems, as a country we've had with law enforcement and, arresting people if it's right or whatever and all that. Law enforcement is just going through a really tough time right now. And, I think you got to look at this from an objective perspective and, look at this situation as an innocent until proven guilty kind of topic. But, Notre Dame is a very strict Catholic school.
Right.
And they're going to have no, what's the right word? They're going to have no discipline when it comes to, dealing with this kind of situation.
No mercy, really.
Patience,
no softness. Yeah, so we'll continue to follow that. I thought, I apologize, I said Devin Butler was one of the players, because I know there's a couple of Notre Dame athletes that were pulled over and they were found with marijuana and a loaded handgun. Zach, am I right on that?
Yeah, I think that sounds right to me.
Yeah, I'd have to look that up in just a little bit. So, yeah, some more off-the-field issues for Notre Dame continuing, so be interesting to see how Brian Kelly handles that going forward. Well, kind of on a Nebraska-related note, Fresno State, they have named their starting quarterback, Chasen Virgil. He's going to be the starter, this according to the Fresno Bee, their local newspaper on FresnoBee.com. He will start. The redshirt freshman got the call for the September 3rd opener at Nebraska, and this according to the paper, not just by maintaining a lead he had on the competition at the start of fall camp, but by extending it. Here's Fresno State head coach Tim DeRuyter. We knew Chasen had an advantage having been there. He's been in the program a year and a half, having gone through the spring system, but I think bringing 3 quarterbacks in gave him some competition, which made him push even harder and stood up against that competition. He earned the job. It wasn't that just we're selecting somebody. He clearly separated himself. If you look at the stats, he had twice the throws and less than half the interceptions than any of the guys that were close to him. The longer we were in the system, the clearer it became. Now, Virgil is not a lot of experience as far as playing time goes. He played in parts of 3 games last year as a true freshman, and then he suffered a season-ending shoulder injury and a loss to Utah, so he was able to get a medical redshirt. So Virgil has competed with Ford Childress and Kilton Anderson, both of whom struggled to operate the offense a year ago. So there was literally about 4 different quarterbacks that were in the rotation for Fresno last year, and it translated to a 3-9 season. And once summer school started, it was Virgil and incoming freshman James Quinton Davis with grad transfer Zach Klein joining the group in July. And so, again, Chasen Virgil will be starting, and Zach, not a lot of playing time for this young man. But as we saw last year in Nebraska football, whether it was, what was his name, Nick Mullins from Southern Miss, Corey Clement of South Alabama, Nebraska has seen inexperienced quarterbacks come to Lincoln and have success. So regardless of his injury problems, regardless of his inexperience, Fresno is kind of they're a West Coast offense. They're a pass-heavy offense, so Nebraska cannot overlook that. Obviously, this kid has really got some confidence as he's climbed up the ranks in the offseason.
Oh, no, like their head coach said, he definitely earned it. So, I mean, that's the whole big deal. But his task is a daunting one, coming to play in front of 91,000 people on opening night in Lincoln. And like we've seen time and time again, Nebraska, it has that streak when they play at night. They don't lose at home at night in recent years. And so he does have a daunting task, but he seems like he's going to be a very good quarterback for him. And like you said, we saw lots of quarterbacks that didn't really have a name to themselves, didn't really do anything big all season, but they really played well against Nebraska. We saw time and time again, Nebraska defenses give up 400 or 500 yards.
Brett Smith with Wyoming.
Absolutely. We saw that over and over last year. So what says that this guy can't do it too?
Yeah, Derek Carr 5 years ago, no one really knew. I mean, people knew like who he was, but he was a senior coming in, and he had never really made a huge splash on the college scene, but senior year was big for him, and it started in Lincoln. I mean, he was slinging the ball all over. He ran all over the place. It took Amir Abdullah's kick return to even win that game. Reid, did you have some extra thoughts on this?
No, I was just saying, I was just giving another example. I think Brett Smith came into Memorial Stadium a couple years ago with Wyoming. And he's actually, I think he's playing in the CFL right now.
I believe so, yeah.
He did have a stint in the NFL. I know he did get drafted, but he's up there in Canada now. But, yeah, I think
Reid waving the Canadian flag proudly.
This guy has
Anyway,
I actually was up there for the CFL game this year.
Yeah, I saw that. That looked dope. How was that?
It was good, and it was awesome because Keontae Evans actually had huge interception that helped turn around that comeback and beat Vancouver. So
very nice.
Can't be any more happy about that. So I think this kid Chasen Virgil will come in, and I think he'll make some noise, especially with the secondary that we did have last year. He might go through some growing pains, obviously, in the the non-conference schedule. So I think, it's definitely a tall task, but, I do think that Nebraska will obviously come out on top week 1. But, it's an intriguing story, and especially when you talk about a guy that is following the footsteps of a Derek Carr, who's currently, the starting quarterback for the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, again, Chasen Virgil, a redshirt freshman, will be starting against Nebraska 8 days from now, a 7 o'clock kickoff, a 5:30 pregame show start on 90.3 KRNU, but that's enough of the shameless plugs. One last headline, then we'll get to some Heisman sleepers and see who's on that list. I think Brad Kaya from Miami's on there again, but Tim Beckman parts ways with the University of North Carolina, saying his presence was a distraction. Yeah, you remember last August, it was actually almost 1 year ago exactly, August 28th of 2015, when Beckman was released as Illinois' head coach. But he announced just yesterday, Beckman did, that he will no longer serve as a volunteer assistant coach at North Carolina, saying he did not want to be a distraction. This comes one day after the school confirmed that Beckman, who was fired as Illinois' coach amid allegations of mistreatment of players, there was an announcement just Wednesday that Beckman was working with Tar Heels coach Larry Fedora and the defensive staff, helping break down film and scouts. So he didn't really have a direct on-the-field role, but he was certainly helping out with scouting and talent and things like that. Here's a statement from Coach Beckman, or former Coach Beckman. "I appreciate the opportunity Coach Fedora, UNC head coach, gave me to stay connected to the sport and be around one of the best staffs in the country. His willingness to help a friend was a benefit both personally and professionally. I do not wish to be a further distraction to the team. I wish Larry and the program nothing but success going forward." Now, Fedora did take some criticism for bringing on Beckman, who was fired, as a school investigation concluded that he influenced medical decisions and pressured players to hurt. And then in April, Beckman settled a wrongful termination lawsuit against the school for $250,000. So, Zach, as much as I respect the University of North Carolina for giving Beckman a second chance, I mean, I don't have a lot of sympathy for Beckman, because it's like this is probably all but the end for his coaching career, and it's hard to have sympathy for a guy who rushed injured players along and that, verbally and somewhat physically mistreated his athletes at Illinois.
No, that's not what you want, obviously, at all in your program, and I think that's just kind of exactly how we can see how to run a program the wrong way, and forcing players, to try and play through injuries and maybe rush them back a little too early. They're still just college athletes. These are 18 to 21-year-old kids mostly that you're dealing with. A lot of these people that you have on your team have futures and possibly in the NFL or CFL, wherever they go. So rushing them back early just to play a college football game for Illinois, probably against Purdue or something, it's not worth it, in my opinion, for him at all. So I'm with you. I don't have any sympathy for him.
Yep. So, again, that was just announced yesterday that it was Tim Beckman making the announcement. He stepped up. So I can kind of respect that. I mean, Beckman knows he has a checkered past, so I can respect the fact that he said, you know what, I don't want to be a distraction to the staff and to these kids. I'm going to respectfully back out. So that part I respect. But, yeah, as far as him being unemployed in college football, I really don't have a lot of sympathy for it. I mean, obviously, I hope Beckman learned from the wrong in his ways, and I hope he's able to, make peace with the mistakes and make peace with maybe some of the athletes that did him wrong or that he did wrong. But, overall, I think that's probably a positive step for North Carolina. I mean, it's always tough having a coach who has a checkered past in your program that, could create distractions, could start rumors. So that's certainly, I think, the right step for North Carolina. They tried it out for a year, for a while or so, less than a year really, since his firing, and they tried it out. They gave him a shot, and Beckman figured out, you know what, it's not for me. I want to, for once, do what's best for student athletes, step aside so I don't have to distract them, and so they can keep their focus on the game. So that part I do like. All right, one last thing for college football, then we'll wrap it up with some NFL, Major League Baseball headlines. Top 10 Heisman sleepers who could win the Heisman Trophy, according to Fox Sports. Making the list are Brad Kaya from Miami, John O'Korn, the Michigan quarterback, Apparently, Jim Harbaugh has taken him under his wing. Saquon Barkley, I believe the running back for Penn State. Lamar Jackson, I've heard a lot of good things about him. Louisville quarterback. Juju Smith-Schuster, the USC running back. Coming in at number 5 is Myles Garrett, I believe a
defensive end.
Yep, defensive end. Thank you. C.J. Beathard at number 4. David Eichel of the Spill Sports Show would be happy to hear that. Myles Gaskin from Washington. I believe he's a running back. And number 2, L.J. Scott from Michigan State, another running back. And then number 1 on the list is Mike Warren of Iowa State, a 500-1 odd favorite of winning the Heisman Trophy.
Place your bets.
Yeah, I guess. So, Reid, you got a Hawkeye, you got a Cyclone on there, kid from Michigan State. Brad Kaya's back on this list. Any of these real contenders, or is this just a bunch of pretenders to you?
Well, there's a lot of variables that take place in all this. Obviously, I like Brad Kaya. I think he's probably the top or the front runner in all this. And then 2 guys that I think, just kind of depends on how their teams perform and how obviously they perform in big games is Lamar Jackson and Louisville, who, obviously came off a devastating loss to Clemson last year. They had that game in their hands and they let it slip. So that's going to be tough. It's going to be in Death Valley. It's going to be hard for Lamar Jackson. And you look at that defense in Clemson, they don't return a lot of starters, but they have a very talented defensive coordinator. Name can't come to mind right now. But, Clemson has always been very tough on defense. And Florida State also, they play them in Tallahassee. So that'll be tough. And then also John O'Korn, the transfer out of Houston, I believe.
Right.
I think that, obviously if O'Korn and Michigan and Harbaugh can gain some momentum, and win the Big Ten and, be a playoff team, I think that O'Korn can be in the playoff. I don't really see Michigan being that big of a passing school.
Mm-hmm.
It really hasn't been. And you look at how Harbaugh has run his systems over the past, even in the NFL, it hasn't been super pass heavy. You talk about Colin Kaepernick and all that. So
Alex Smith. Yep.
Yeah, lots of variables to be played. And I think it's a little bit too early to decide who's going to be the Heisman sleeper, even front runner at this point.
Zach Penrice.
Well, I think that this
awkward pause.
That was something I did not expect that.
Reid Hunsacker.
Sorry.
I looking at this list, I just don't even understand why this is even a thing. I think that these 10 guys have zero shot. I think that the final 3 is already determined. I think that it's Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, and Deshaun Watson. I think that is the clear final 3 after what McCaffrey did in the Rose Bowl, after what Leonard Fournette did in the first half of last season, and after what Deshaun Watson did all season for Clemson. I think that they're all back. And I think that
how many do they invite to the Heisman? Is it 5 now?
It's 3. It depends
4.
on the year. I think it's 3 or 5, but traditionally it's 3. But that number could go up. But I think that those 3, if there are more, at least those 3 are going to get there. Just barring injury.
It seems to me that this year compared to the last couple, it seems like a more difficult year for a dark horse, say an Amir Abdullah from 2 years ago. It was pretty diluted. It was pretty even playing field. Like Winston wasn't as good as he was in 13, so I thought it was more kind of even keel a couple years back. But now, you've got McCaffrey, Fournette, Deshaun Watson. I mean, it looks pretty clear, right?
Yeah,
and there's a lot of, and then you go down the list from there. That's when the playing field gets even. But you got those top 3 right on top of the charts, and then you've got all kinds of good players in the Big Ten. I mean, you're thinking about And C.J. Beathard, I just wanted to get to him real quick. They're saying, according to Fox Sports, that Iowa has a chance to go undefeated. He's the top returning passer in the Big Ten, threw for 2,800 yards, 17 touchdowns last year. Beathard could double those numbers this year. He's healthy in 2016 against a lackluster schedule, and he could potentially wind up in New York. And I wanted to read about Mike Warren, Iowa State running back. They call it the ultimate long shot. He ran for 1,300 yards last year on 227 carries, only 5 TDs. Decent numbers for Iowa State, but hardly Heisman numbers, right? First-year head coach Matt Campbell loves pounding the rock with his backs. Iowa State has a chance to be a 500 team this year. No, really, they do. And with the showcase Thursday night against Oklahoma on November 3rd, Warren has an opportunity to come out of nowhere, become a household name, maybe play in front of some scouts. So, a chance for Iowa State to maybe finally levitate one of their players on the big stage. Mike Warren's obviously a guy who has a lot of experience from last year, and L.J. Scott is one I'm definitely watching. I think Michigan State, without Connor Cook, I think they're going to go more to the nose to the grindstone, run the football type of stuff, what they did with Le'Veon Bell back in the day. So I think Michigan State's going to become more of a more of a run team this year, so I think LJ Scott is definitely one to watch on this list. Beathard, say what you will, Husker fans. I think Iowa is going to be a force to reckon with. I think they go 9-3, roughly, give or take. I think they lose 2-3 games, but I think Beathard is top 3 quarterback in the Big Ten. I mean, I think it's Barrett, Beathard, Armstrong, I think, and then down from there. So, yeah, not great. I don't think it's going to be a great year for passing in the Big Ten Conference. But CJ Beathard, I mean, a lot of people said he played hurt last year, and he was still a good game manager. So if he plays healthy and Kirk Ferentz digs out his hat of tricks a little bit, I think, yeah, he could have a big year. Say what you will. So really interesting list there and a good conversation. So, again, I'm interested to see how Watson, McCaffrey, and Fournette, if they will live up to the hype, because, Manziel and Winston in their second year in football, they were at the top of the list, and they didn't really turn out the way they did in year number 1. So that'll be interesting to watch moving forward. Take a quick break, wrap it up with some NFL, MLB notes, and maybe some fun facts and come on man moments. That's coming up next, last few minutes of the show when we come back. Beyond the Arc, KRN YouTube.
Care to chime in?
Pick up the phone and start dialing.
Then call the Beyond the Arc Nothing But Net hotline at 402-472-7201. That's 402-472-7201.
6 callers ahead of us, Jimmy.
Or message us on Twitter and Facebook at facebook.com/BTAKRNU2 or at twitter.com/beyond_arc.
You can do it!
You're listening to Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Few more minutes left on the show. Tommy Rezaj, Zach Penrice, Kellan Havikin here with you. Christian Folsom stopping by to say hello, fellow KRNU sports talent guy. So I wanted to get to a fun fact that I had here.
Time now for fun facts.
This is fun, right? We're having fun.
The part of the show where the Beyond the Arc crew shares with you 3 fun sports facts that you may not have ever known before.
Ooh, weird.
Now, here's fun facts.
Well, I'm sure you guys heard about Giants pitcher Matt Moore last night, the nearly no-no that he had. But nearly a no-hitter, but he gave up a single to Corey Seager on Seager bobblehead night in Los Angeles. 133rd pitch, and Seager had a clean single. So Moore nearly ended. I did not know this. Matt Moore, the 27-year-old, nearly ended what's still a 5-year drought, a record 5-year drought without a no-hitter in San Francisco. He was nearly the first Giant pitcher to silence the Dodgers since 1915 when Ruby Marquardt stopped Brooklyn. So back in 1915, the Giants were in New York and the Dodgers in Brooklyn. That's how long. That's almost just an incredible rarity last night. The Giants pitching a no-hitter to the rival Dodgers. 27-year-old Moore struck out 7. He walked 3. Giants won 4-0 last night. I know that was on TV. It was a late game on the West Coast. I was wishing I could watch that. Any fun facts or come on man moments? Because I have a fun new come on man bump. If anyone has anything
for anything, I can't really find anything.
Okay, well yeah. If one of you comes up with something, let me know. Oh, but we do have this to play though.
Can you feel it?
It's time to grab your TV Guide.
TV Guide is always thrown, never handed to another person. It's the world's most thrown reading material.
Your remote control.
Does anyone need the remote?
And fire up the grill.
Chicken, hot dog, burger.
I'm a vegetarian.
There is soda inside.
As we get you primed for the exciting sports weekend ahead.
Oh, baby! You are looking live. And he scores on the last play of the game. Unbelievable!
It's time for the weekend preview on Beyond the Arc.
All right. Big thing, as we talked about with Brent Wagner's Nebraska Volleyball, they kick off their season tonight against number 10 Florida, 6 o'clock start on the Husker Sports Network. I'll plug my company, 107.3, has the coverage in Lincoln, part of the Broadcast House family, longtime Husker Sports Network affiliate. It's nonprofit radio. I'm allowed to do that. Anyway, also MLB wildcard races are kind of starting to heat up. A couple of key series this weekend. Baltimore at New York. The Yankees are, I think 3.5 games out of the wild card, and Baltimore is I think, a game ahead. They're right in the wild card driver's seat right now. I think they have the first spot. So that's going to be a really good series. I hope the Yankees are able to gain some ground. And, it's because it's the Red Sox and the Jays that are game ahead, and then the Orioles right there at the cutoff points. The Orioles at the cutoff point. So that will be an interesting one to watch. Also coming up this weekend, as far as another interesting one, Kansas City at Boston. The Royals are now 4 games out of the wild card. They've now won 15 of their last 18, and Zach Penrice, they look to be right on form. Escobar homered last night. The Royals won 5-2 over the Miami Marlins, so they take the series. And Escobar is now batting .388 in his last 13 games. They are on fire.
Yeah, well, no, they completely are now. Going to Boston, that's a tough one, and they're 14 below 500 on the road this year, so It's obviously a very big series for them. They're right there. They're right back in the mix in the wild card. They seemed like they were way out about a month ago at the All-Star break. There were a lot of Royals fans writing them off, saying their year is done, but here they are right back in the mix. It seems like that's kind of their thing now. And then, Tommy, the last big series this weekend, definitely Cubs at Dodgers. That's a big one. L.A. is clinging to like a half-game lead in the NL West. Obviously, Chicago's walking away with the NL Central, but the Dodgers have got the best team in baseball in town, and then the Giants are hosting the Braves, so the Giants will probably at least take 2 out of 3 right there. And so the NL West is going to be maybe the tightest division in baseball, that and the AL East when it comes down to it right at the end.
Yeah, and the Giants are only a game and a half ahead of that wild card cutoff spot. Excuse me. Blah. The Cardinals right there. So the Cardinals and the Orioles are the 2 wild card teams right now. So, really important weekend for the Dodgers. And the Dodgers only have a 2-game lead over the Giants in the NL West. So that'll be a fun one to watch. And then NFL preseason, I don't get hyped for preseason, but hey, just think of it as filler. Think of it as a warm-up for college football, which comes back on Thursday. I love that new button, if you couldn't already tell. So, a couple games that might be interesting tonight. New England at Carolina. Saturday, Zach's Chiefs are at the Bears. My Lions at the Ravens. Philadelphia at Indianapolis. That's an interesting one. And then Sunday night primetime, Cincinnati at Jacksonville. 7 o'clock NBC. I hope Al Michaels doesn't have to call that. That'll be awful. But, a really good game. Los Angeles at Denver. That'll be interesting. The Rams in their new place. And Tennessee at Oakland. Unfortunately, we are all out of time, so that's what's going on this weekend. Lots of Major League Baseball, NFL, and Husker Volleyball. Again, 6 o'clock Friday tonight against Florida. 5:30 tomorrow against Texas. All on the Husker Sports Network. Go Big Red. We'll come back next week with a big college football preview. The Spill Sports Show coming up next.
You've been listening to Beyond the Arc on KRNU2.
Thank you very much. It was fun.